Well, the Illinois Supreme Court set to release a ruling on no cash bail Tuesday. That's news we got Friday from the Illinois Supreme Court, releasing an anticipated opinion on something that even the U.S. Supreme Court does. They kind of put out there, hey, expect these cases coming up. So we are expecting the Illinois Supreme Court to rule on the case about whether or not Illinois should have no cash bail statewide. So let's get on into this. On Friday, the court announced that Tuesday they would release an opinion in the case Roe v. Raoul. That's the Kankakee County State's Attorney Jim Roe suing the Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul and Governor J.B. Pritzker and legislative leaders, challenging the state's Safety, Accountability, Fairness, Equity Today Act, the SAFETY Act. And this is a challenge that state's attorneys from across the state brought forward. So the criminal justice reform measure, it narrowly passed back in 2021, and it was modified several times since then. One component that's on hold because of the challenge that was brought forward removes cash bonds statewide as part of how county prosecutors can assure that criminal defendants show up for trial. So Kankakee County State's Attorney Jim Roe, he led the challenge in the Illinois Supreme Court when it was heard in March. And here's what he had to say. Some of the arguments he brought forward to the justices on the panel, the 7 justices on the panel of the Illinois Supreme Court. Again, here's Jim Roe, Kankakee County State's Attorney, with those arguments.
This court found that if we are regulated by the act, we are a proper party to that litigation. And plaintiff state's attorneys and sheriffs are certainly regulated under that act.
And you are adversely, what is the language of the case? Adversely. There's an adverse impact on your rights. Is that right?
There absolutely is, as the circuit court found. State's attorneys, prosecutors have an inherent interest in ensuring that we can move cases through the court system, that we can secure a defendant's appearance at trial. The sheriff has an inherent interest.
Why don't you continue to have that right?
I'm sorry?
Why don't you continue to have that right? If you say it's a right, a constitutional right, I'm not sure, but you say you have a right to ensure that defendants appear, to continue to appear. Doesn't that continue under this act?
Well, the act abolishes the opportunity for a state's attorney to even request a monetary bail as a sufficient surety.
So again, Jim Roe laying out some of the arguments that he has on the issue in front of the Illinois Supreme Court back in March. Governor J.B. Pritzker kind of reiterates some of the thinking here because supporters of ending cash bail, they argue that such policies allow wealthy people to essentially buy their way out of jail while those of lesser means have to languish behind bars pending trial. Here's what the governor had to say when he was asked about this back in March as to the direction of the case.
Of the proceedings at the Supreme Court as I was driving down here, and it was fascinating to listen to both sides. It's clear to me that there's one side that has the much better argument on the SAFETY Act, and I think that will prevail. So that's what I can say about that. Well, bail isn't a deterrent. Bail is something that happens after somebody commits the crime. So what I think many sheriffs are concerned about, and I think we should talk about this, is the dollars that they used to be able to collect, or that they would be able to collect with bail, they have been, that they won't be able to collect locally to cover costs at their sheriff's offices. I think that's a not unreasonable thing for us all to be discussing going forward. But that's not a reason to oppose the SAFETY Act. And so my view is the SAFETY Act is actually keeping people much safer. What's it doing? Keeping violent criminals in jail, not allowing them to have bail, but taking nonviolent criminals and saying that there's no reason for us to have to pay for you to sit in jail when you can't afford the few $100s to get out of jail. And the reality is you're not a danger to the community. That will be something decided by judges, I might add. It's not the legislature deciding whether someone would stay in jail or not. It's judges who would make those decisions. And I think that's the right way for us to do it. It's a more fair system than to have people sitting in jail for weeks, days, weeks, or months when they just don't happen to have the few $100s or a couple of $1,000, again, when they've committed a nonviolent crime. to be let out.
So again, Governor J.B. Pritzker there saying, hey, the law says it's up to the judge. It's the discretion of the judge. Well, previous law allowed for that as well. A judge could determine whether or not bail was going to be issued or if they would be allowed to go on their own recognizance and so on. So some interesting back and forth there. But if you recall, during the 2022 election cycle, criticism of the no cash bail policy, it made national headlines when it was featured on the popular podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience, where he said the safety law, they're essentially eliminating cash bail for almost everything dangerous. It's crazy. I mean, everyone's freaking out, Rogan said. Now, critics said that unchanged, the Safety Act included no cash bail for serious crimes. An individual could be let out of jail pre-trial, like murder, arson, kidnapping, and more. Lawsuits continued to stack up at the tail end of the year. Governor J.B. Pritzker signed that amendment that clarified criminal defendants would be held pre-trial for serious crimes and clarified the law enforcement can arrest someone who's trespassing, but only after first issuing a citation. But again, you've got the governor saying that keeping violent criminals in jail, not allowing them to have bail, but taking nonviolent criminals and allowing them to get out of jail without bail, he says keeps the communities more safe. But there's something else here, too, that's got people critical of whatever decision comes out of the Illinois Supreme Court, because two justices on the Illinois Supreme Court each got $1 million to their campaign funds in 2022 when they were running for the job from Governor J.B. Pritzker, who's the lead defendant in this case challenging the Safety Act. And Governor J.B. Pritzker, when I asked him about that back in March, here's what he had to say about the idea of these judges and these justices, rather, having to recuse themselves because of this perceived conflict of interest of him giving $1 million to these two Supreme Court justices.
Supreme Court justices, and should they recuse themselves in two important cases coming up, Safety Act, no cash bail, and also the gun ban?
I am sure this is something that the right wing is trying to stir up. I know you've written about it. The fact of the matter is I supported candidates who are running all across the board. If you're suggesting that the fact that I gave money to, let's say, the Democratic Party or to the committees that supported candidates means that everybody who received any money has to recuse themselves from anything to do with the state of Illinois, that's ridiculous. And I've certainly never asked anybody to vote a certain way or decide on a case a certain way. I would never do that. I never have. I never will. And these are independent judges, and they didn't go around and campaign on things, that they thought would win my support for them. I believe in them. I supported them like lots of other people did.
So again, the governor saying that he's not asking anybody to rule a certain way, even though he's the chief defendant in a case brought by state's attorneys challenging a law that he enacted, the Safety Act. But you've also got the still lingering the gun ban challenge that's in the Illinois Supreme Court. We don't know when that's going to be released, but we know that a ruling on the Safety Act, especially whether or not the state's going to have no cash bail statewide, whether or not that's going to be implemented, we'll know that tomorrow at about 9 o'clock when the Illinois Supreme Court is expected to release that ruling on no cash bail statewide. So we'll be watching that closely and bring you the latest here with Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk. Follow me anywhere, Bishop on Air. Again, Bishop on Air.